War. War never changes.
Some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 49, Yemen, and why it's important. Yemen is one of the oldest inhabited places on Earth. As long as people could creep along the coasts in primitive boats, Yemen was not only inhabited, but important. Like so many other ancient lands, it has gone by many names. Its current name, Yemen, is from the Arabic, meaning variably south or the right hand of Arabia, much like the European Levant is known as El Sham, or the left hand of Arabia. The Romans referred to it as Arabia Felix, or Fortunate Arabia, owing to its, in some places, fertile land. This opposed to Arabia Deserta, what most Westerners think of when Arabia comes to mind. Sheba is another of its ancient names. It is famous for two of its cities, Mocha and Aden, the former being a port where coffee grown in Yemen was exported, and Aden, the port city the British seized to support both India and the coal ships that cruised there following the opening of the Suez Canal. For modern times, the supreme fact of Yemen is that it, like the Horn of Africa, comprising Somalia, Djibouti, and Eritrea, controls the narrow Bab al-Mandab Strait from the Gulf of Aden into the Red Sea, which means it controls traffic through the Suez Canal, which means, most significantly, trade to and from Europe, primarily Middle Eastern oil and various trinkets from China. It is technically part of Asia, but lies south of over one-third of Africa. As much as I would love to discuss the 10,000-year-old history of Yemen, I think a brief overview of the introduction of the British and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which Yemen was a part of, will suffice. With one notable exception, when the Arabs became Muslims, Yemen was both an important part religiously and laid home to both Shia and Sunni descendant populations. This religious rift remains a driver of its politics today. Harkening back to our Mahan discussion, with the advent of coal-fired steamships, coaling stations became a critical aspect of all naval powers. Yemen's critical location, just outside the Red Sea and roughly halfway to India, made its location a lucrative objective for Queen Victoria's Royal Navy. Britain secured an agreement from the Sultan of Lahej, allowing the British to maintain a port at Aden. This agreement was not without some force, and, quite quickly, the Sultan found himself expelled. This agreement in 1838 left the British in charge of the southern part of Yemen until World War I, when the Turks expelled the otherwise preoccupied British. Following the Entente powers' loss, a kingdom was established in 1923, strongly supported by the British. This rise of Arab monarchies being matched in the various other kingdoms such as Jordan, Iraq, Kuwait, and, of course, Saudi Arabia. But the coastal areas of South Yemen, alone of which the British had any real interest, was culturally and geographically quite separate from the mountainous north. Early in the British occupation, the port of Aden was almost completely devoid of Arabs, but around 1900 more and more Arab Yemenis came to work the docks and stockyards. During World War II, Aden's key location made it reportedly the second busiest port in the world after New York City. From 1918, Yemen was divided into the Kingdom of Yemen, also known as North Yemen, and the Aden Protectorate, which was actually more eastern Yemen, but otherwise colloquially known as South Yemen. Until 1935, Aden was technically considered part of British India. But as with all things post-World War II, this imperial model was to crumble before the forces of socialist revolution in the name of anti-colonialism and desired to turn tribes into nation-states. North Yemen became an independent monarchy following the end of the Ottoman Empire, known fittingly as the Kingdom of Yemen. But in 1962, Gamal Abdel Nasser saw the opportunity to expand his Arab republic as he sought leadership of a pan-Arab nation and supported the overthrow of the king of North Yemen, Mohammed al-Badr, and took control of the capital at Sana'a, thus establishing, uncreatively, the Yemen Arab Republic. This coup in 1962 started the North Yemen Civil War, which pitted Egyptian-supported socialist Arabs against Saudi and Jordanian-supported royalist forces. This war continued until Nasser withdrew his Egyptian forces to prepare for the Six-Day War against Israel in 1967, when both sides, exhausted by the fighting, came to an agreement, and Saudi Arabia, the chief supporter of the royalist rebels, agreed to recognize the Arab Republic in 1970. Egyptian forces numbered up to 70,000 and constituted the bulk of the Republican military. The Soviet Union pumped in billions worth of arms and munitions, notably supplying the Republicans with jet fighters. The fighting was disastrous for Nasser's military, with some observers blaming the humiliating loss in 1967 to the Israelis as partially due to the loss of trained fighters in Yemen. Some observers have referred to it as Egypt's Vietnam. Nasser's desire for control over Yemen at this time was driven by several factors. Most notably, Syria's withdrawal from the United Arab Republic was seen as a huge blow to Nasser's prestige. This occurred in no small part due to influence from the Saudi royal family, who supported the North Yemenese king. Algeria had succeeded in throwing the French out of Algeria, which again undermined Nasser's role as undisputed leader of the Arab world. Finally, by seizing control of Yemen, this would solidify, necessarily in my view, his control over the Suez. Nasser's death in 1970 preceded by mere months the Saudi recognition of the Republic of Yemen and the dissolvement of the Yemeni throne. The timing of these events is not coincidence. The House of Saud could not acquiesce to any actions which strengthened Nasser's standing. But with Nasser's death, the Saudis had no need to drain even more resources into an increasingly expensive and losing campaign. But it wasn't only North Yemen that was getting the Nasser, and through him Soviet, treatment of revolution. In 1963, 1 year after fomenting the revolutionary coup in North Yemen, Nasser-supported Arab socialists attacked a group of British officials with a grenade attack in Aden. The Aden Protectorate was arguably the bigger target for Nasser, as expelling the British from Suez was his first major accomplishment. If he could eliminate the British from Aden, this would be an even larger relative accomplishment. This attack followed British attempts to calm Arab restlessness by abolishing the colony of Yemen and establishing the state of Aden within a federation of South Arabia as a British protectorate within the old colony. Obviously, this didn't work as intended and just showed British weakness, as its colonies melted away under international socialist pressure. This federation consisted of 15 separate tribes, each of whom sought control of South Yemen, but by themselves remained incapable of subduing the rest. Only weeks after the 26 September 1962 kicked off the North Yemen Civil War, on 14 October, the National Liberation Front and the Front for the Liberation of Occupied South Yemen, later known by the kick-ass acronym FLOSSY, initiated what would be variably known as the Aden Emergency or the South Yemen Civil War. If these groups are starting to sound a bit like a Monty Python skit, you wouldn't be mistaken. There were 5 separate groups, all fighting the British and each other. The South Arabian League, the Organization for the Liberation of the Occupied South, the People's Liberation Party, and the aforementioned National Liberation Front, and of course, FLOSSY. Their tactics were almost entirely targeting British civilians with ambushes and grenades. The South Arabian League was supported by Saudi Arabia. FLOSSY was Egyptian-controlled. These groups were constantly merging and splitting. Ironically, after the NLF killed 36 FLOSSY, many members of the latter used their British passports to flee to England towards the end of the Civil War. The 1967 war exasperated the problem when Nasser claimed Britain had aided Israel in the Six-Day War. This led to a revolt by the Arab police of Aden and ultimately led to the early complete withdrawal of the British, with no agreement on the succeeding government. So on 30 November 1967, the Federation of South Arabia was replaced by the People's Republic of Southern Yemen, the first and only openly communist government in the Arab world. As with all communist governments, its first order of business was to carve up the existing territory in such a way as to deliberately weaken the various tribes by dividing their territories. This policy's aftermath can be seen in Ukraine today. But even more radical factions soon gained power in a coup known as the Corrective Move and renamed South Yemen into the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. Unsurprisingly, both North Yemen and South Yemen fought for control of the other, with open fighting in 1972. And while the actual fighting lasted only a few weeks with zero change to the status quo antebellum, South Yemen continued to support a communist insurrection in North Yemen, creatively known as the National Democratic Front. More than any military conquest, the fighting showed the divide of the world. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Iran, the UK, and US all supported North Yemen to various degrees, mostly political. The Soviet Union, Iraq, Libya, and Cuba openly supported South Yemen. As this occurred at the same time as Vietnam and Rhodesia, It only highlights the not-so-cold nature of the Cold War. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union had tired of supporting its all-but-in-name empire, and South Yemen's role as the sole Arab communist nation could not sustain itself without massive Soviet support. These cracks first showed in the 1986 South Yemen Civil War, resulting from a coup which ended up killing thousands and much of the leadership of the South Yemen government in only a few days. Not long after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1990, South and North Yemen united, but in 1994 the country dissolved into yet another chaotic civil war. The rise of Islamic Jihad fueled the northern Yemeni forces, and the still vestigally socialist southern leadership crumbled, with Aden falling in but a few months. The North had claimed the mantle of leadership for the unified Yemen, retaining the capital and the name. The socialist southern leadership chafed at their subordinate nature, while Islamists rejected the secular law in place of Sharia. Further exasperating the situation, the Gulf War resulted in thousands of Yemenis being expelled from Saudi Arabia due to Yemen's support of Iraq. This caused a massive financial blow. The Civil War in 1994 was a short but brutal affair, and North Yemen proved superior at all levels to the South Yemeni forces. Aden proved then, as it had for over a century, as the center of gravity for South Yemen, and its capture ended the war. In 2000, the USS Cole was attacked in the port of Aden by al-Qaeda, resulting in the death of 17 sailors. And in 2004, the cleric Hussein al-Houthi, who headed a Shia sect known as the Ziyadi, started the Houthi insurrections. In 2014, with little pushback from the Yemen army, the Houthis seized the Yemeni capital at Sana'a, following the Saudi ouster of the popularly elected Ali Abdullah Saleh, albeit over a decade previously, in support of Abdullah Mansur Hadi. Saleh supported the Houthis, hoping they would lead him back into power. The Houthis were happy for Saleh's support initially, but apparently found little need for it after seizing power, as the Houthis assassinated him in 2017, but I digress. The Houthis themselves come from the extreme north of Yemen bordering Saudi Arabia, and from the mountains there, not the coastal areas. The Houthis and Iran both deny any direct command relationship, but the Houthi flag is a close replica of both Iran's Guardian Council as well as Hezbollah's flag. In addition, the Houthis' motto, God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse on the Jews, victory to Islam, mimics the Friday prayers in Iran. Like all proxies, the level of command wielded by Iran is debatable, but that they exercise some control over the Houthis is undeniable. Since the coup in 2014, the former government, led by Ali Abdullah Saleh, has been supported by a coalition of Arab states. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, Egypt, Morocco, Jordan, Sudan have all contributed some level of military support to the former Yemeni government. Yemen has proven a deadly playground for other nations seeking both power within the Ummah as well as influencing Indo-European trade through the Red Sea for well over 100 years, and often these nations are the same. After decades of fighting, these external forces start to grow a culture of support tying national pride with foreign success. You can see these talking points now with Ukraine, dredging up Cold War ideology for modern justifications. Iran, along with North Korea, and, up until recently, Syria and Hezbollah, have supported the Houthis. Open conflict has largely ended, but the Houthi attacks on shipping in Israel have ended any hope for a lasting ceasefire. In 2020, the Trump administration declared the Houthis a terrorist organization. The Biden administration revoked the designation, but it is clear from Trump's latest actions that the Houthis are considered an enemy of the United States. Unsurprising considering their published aforementioned motto. As with up until recently Syria, Hezbollah, and through them Lebanon, Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and Iraq after the fall of Saddam, and the Houthis, have all danced to various degrees of coordination to the tune played by the mullahs of Iran's Guardian Council. And while I have discussed many of these proxies, it may be time to take a more direct look at Iran's current government, where it came from, and why it is insistent upon calling for the death of America. And that is something we'll go over next week. Thanks for joining us today. If you liked what you heard, please like, subscribe, rate, and comment. Most importantly, share with your friends. Join the conversation at the War 102 subreddit, and check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for links to more information and supporting videos. Send me an email at war102podcast@gmail.com. I look forward to your comments and hope you join us again next week. See you then.